They say silence is golden. But for Callista Frost, silence was survival. In 2024, the pharmaceutical industry generated over $800 billion in the United States alone. Cancer drugs accounted for nearly $150 billion of that total. When that much money is at stake, people don't just compete, they kill. This is the story of a woman who couldn't speak, but whose nose could smell a conspiracy that had been buried for 14 years. A conspiracy that began with a car crash on a Colorado highway and ended with the most explosive pharmaceutical fraud case in Senate history. Her name was Callista Frost, and on the night of November 7, 2024, she saved a man's life by slapping a champagne glass out of his hand. The forensic chemists would later confirm what she had smelled from 6 feet away: potassium cyanide concentration 0.03%, masked with synthetic bitter almond compound, enough to stop a human heart in under 90 seconds. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how a mute fragrance chemist became the key witness in a billion-dollar murder conspiracy, you need to understand where her silence began. 12 years earlier, Interstate 70 Colorado Rockies, October 2010. The autumn aspens blurred past the windows of the silver Honda Accord like streaks of fire against the darkening sky. Callista sat in the back seat, earbuds in geometry homework spread across her lap. She was 12 years old. In 6 hours, she would lose the ability to speak forever. Her father, David Frost, gripped the steering wheel with both hands. His knuckles were white. Her mother, Elara, held a manila folder against her chest like a shield. Neither of them had spoken for the last 20 minutes. Callista pulled out one earbud. "Dad, are we still going to Aunt Marie's?" David's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. For just a moment, they met hers. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Change of plans, sweetheart. We need to make a stop first." "Where?" "The federal building in Denver. Your mom and I have to drop off some papers." Elara turned in her seat. Her face was pale tight with something Callista couldn't name. Fear maybe, or determination. "Callie, listen to me. When we get there, you stay in the car. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone except us. Understand?" Callista frowned. "What's going on?" "Nothing you need to worry about." Her mother's voice was too bright, too forced. "We just need to deliver something important. Then we'll get ice cream on the way to Marie's. Deal?" Before Callista could answer, her father's phone rang. He answered on speaker. David Frost. The voice on the other end was smooth, professional, and completely devoid of warmth. "Dr. Frost, this is Vincent Marsh. We need to talk about the documents you removed from the Cross Therapeutics facility." David's jaw tightened. "I didn't remove anything. I copied data that should have been submitted to the FDA 3 years ago. Data your company falsified." "That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. Your phase 3 trial results for oncozine show 12% efficacy. Your FDA submission claims 87%. That's not a rounding error, Vincent. That's fraud." Silence on the other end. Then, "Dr. Frost, I think you're confused. The stress of your position." "Don't." David's voice cut like a blade. "I have the original trial data. I have the modified data. I have emails from Vivian Cross herself ordering the changes. Tomorrow morning, the FDA gets all of it." "David." The voice changed. Colder now. "You have a family, a daughter. Think very carefully about what you're doing." Elara's hand shot out. He hit the disconnect button. The car filled with terrible silence. "David, he just threatened, I know." David's voice was quiet, steady, which means we're doing the right thing. He pressed the accelerator. The Honda surged forward. Callista's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't understand the words FDA trial data efficacy, but she understood the tone. Her parents were scared, and her parents were never scared. She was about to ask another question when her mother screamed, "David!" The semi-truck came out of nowhere. One moment, the highway was empty. The next, 18 wheels of chrome and steel were bearing down on them from the left, crossing the median horn, blaring like the voice of God. David wrenched the wheel right. Tires shrieked. The Honda fishtail caught the shoulder and the world became a chaos of motion and sound. They hit the guardrail at 60 miles per hour. The metal barrier bent, groaned, and gave way. For one impossible moment, they were airborne. Then, they were falling. Callista's scream caught in her throat as the car tumbled down the embankment. Sky, ground, sky, ground, sky. The windows exploded inward in a shower of safety glass. Her father's head cracked against the driver's side window with a sound like a gunshot. Her mother's seatbelt snapped. The car hit the bottom of the ravine and rolled one final time before slamming into a stand of pine trees. Then silence. Callista hung upside down, suspended by her seatbelt. Blood ran down her forehead, warm and sticky. Her ears rang. She tried to call for her parents, but no sound came out. That was when she smelled it. Gasoline, smoke, fire. The front of the car was crumpled like an accordion. Through the shattered windshield, she could see flames licking at the hood. Her father wasn't moving. Her mother's body was twisted at an angle that made Callista's stomach lurch. She fumbled with the seatbelt. Her fingers were slick with blood. The buckle wouldn't release. The smoke thickened. It filled the car acrid and choking. She tried to scream again. Her throat seized. She coughed and the cough became a retch and the retch became a desperate silent gasp for air. Through the haze, she saw her father's hand move. Slowly, painfully. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small silver USB drive. His fingers were shaking. Blood ran from his nose, his ears. He turned his head, the motion, clearly agony, and locked eyes with Callista. His lips moved. She couldn't hear him over the roar of the flames, but she could read the words. Hide this. He pressed the drive into her palm. His hand closed over hers, squeezing once. Hard. Don't trust anyone. Then his hand fell away. The flames reached the engine. Callista didn't remember what happened next. Years later, the therapists would tell her it was traumatic dissociation. Her conscious mind had shut down to protect itself. But her body remembered. Somehow she got the seatbelt undone. Somehow she dragged herself through the broken rear window. Somehow she crawled up the embankment on her hands and knees, the USB drive clutched in one fist. Behind her, the Honda exploded. The shock wave threw her forward. She hit the gravel shoulder of the highway face first, tasted blood, couldn't breathe, tried to scream, but her throat was full of smoke and glass and something else, something wet and wrong. A semi-truck driver found her there 20 minutes later unconscious and bleeding 10 feet from the twisted wreckage. The paramedics told her later that she was lucky. The smoke inhalation had been severe, but the real damage came from what she'd done to her own vocal cords. In her desperation to breathe, to scream, to call for help, she had torn the delicate tissue beyond repair. The heat and the chemicals in the smoke had done the rest. 3 surgeries, 4 specialists, all of them said the same thing. The vocal cords were destroyed, nerve damage was extensive. She would never speak again. Callista Frost spent her 13th birthday in a hospital room learning sign language and trying not to think about the fact that her parents were dead. The official report called it an accident. Driver fatigue. The semi-truck driver had fallen asleep at the wheel, crossed the median and caused a collision. Tragic. Unavoidable. No one mentioned the phone call. No one mentioned cross therapeutics. And when the police inventoried Callista's belongings from the crash, the USB drive was gone. She would spend the next 14 years wondering if she had imagined it. If her father had really given her something, or if her traumatized brain had invented the memory to make sense of the senseless. She would wonder right up until the night she found it again. But that was still years away. Present day, Denver, Colorado, November 7th, 2024. Callista Frost stood in front of her bathroom mirror and practiced smiling. It didn't come naturally anymore. 14 years of silence had taught her to communicate with her eyes, her hands, the tilt of her head. But smiles, genuine ones, required a kind of unself-consciousness she'd lost somewhere between the car crash and her 26th birthday. She let the smile drop, studied her reflection instead. Dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, minimal makeup, gray eyes that had learned to speak louder than words. The scar on her throat was barely visible, now a thin white line that disappeared beneath the collar of her blouse. Most people didn't notice it. The ones who did usually assumed it was from a tracheotomy. They weren't entirely wrong. She checked her watch, 6:15. The gala started at 7. She had 45 minutes to cross town, pick up her boss, and arrive at the Denver Convention Center looking like she belonged there. Spoiler, she didn't belong there. The Rocky Mountain Pharmaceutical Conference was the kind of event where CEOs networked with venture capitalists over $30 glasses of champagne, where patent attorneys made deals that would determine which cancer patients lived and which ones couldn't afford their medication, where people like Calista lab technicians, researchers, the ones who actually did the science, were window dressing. She pulled on her coat and grabbed her purse. Her phone buzzed. Dr. Richard Palmer running late. Meet you there. Don't forget the presentation materials. Calista closed her eyes, took a breath. The presentation materials. Of course, the materials for the presentation that Dr. Palmer would deliver. The presentation based on research that Calista had spent 6 months conducting. Research that Palmer would claim as his own because that was how it worked when you were a mute lab technician with a bachelor's degree instead of a tenured researcher with a PhD and a personality like a wet sock. She typed her response. Calista, see you there. She didn't add what she was thinking. One day, I'm going to stand on that stage myself. One day, people will listen. But not today. Today, she was Dr. Richard Palmer's assistant. Today she would stand in the back of the conference room while he presented her work on olfactory compound identification. Today she would smile when people congratulated him and pretend she didn't care. Tomorrow she would update her resume. She grabbed the presentation materials, a leather portfolio containing 300 slides on gas chromatography mass spectrometry analysis of synthetic fragrance compounds, and headed for the door. She had no way of knowing that in exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes she would save a man's life, or that doing so would set in motion a chain of events that would destroy a pharmaceutical empire, expose a 14-year-old conspiracy, and finally give her a voice that didn't require words. The Denver Convention Center glittered like a jewelry box. Calista stood in the valet line, watching luxury cars disgorge men in tuxedos and women in evening gowns. A Bentley, 2 Teslas, a Mercedes S-Class that probably cost more than her annual salary. She looked down at her simple black dress, bought on sale at Nordstrom Rack, and felt a familiar tightness in her chest. The space was enormous when she entered. 3 stories of marble and chrome with a chandelier the size of a small car suspended from the ceiling. Pharmaceutical company banners hung from the balconies. Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, and there near the back, the deep purple and silver of Cross Therapeutics. Calista's steps slowed. Cross Therapeutics, the name that had appeared in her nightmares for 14 years. The company her parents had been investigating when they died. She walked past the Cross Therapeutics banner without looking at it, and made her way to the registration desk. After checking in, she moved into the crowd. The main ballroom was even more overwhelming than the lobby. Round tables covered in white linen, a stage at the far end with a podium and a massive screen, waiters circulating with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. She found a quiet corner near the refreshment table and checked her phone. Still no message from Dr. Palmer. She looked around the room, tried to spot him in the sea of tuxedos. That was when she saw him, not Palmer, the other him. He stood near the stage, talking with a cluster of men in expensive suits. Tall, maybe 6'2", broad-shouldered, steel grey hair cut military short. A face that looked like it had been carved from granite, all sharp angles and hard lines. But it was his eyes that caught her. Even from across the room, she could see their intensity. Pale blue, almost colorless. The kind of eyes that looked right through you and catalogued everything they saw. She pulled out her program and flipped to the keynote speaker section. Thaddeus Kane, CEO Kane, Pharmaceutical Industries, the future of accessible oncology, breaking the monopoly on cancer treatment. Her breath caught. Kane Pharmaceutical, Everyone in the industry knew the name. They were the company that had spent the last 5 years developing generic versions of the most expensive cancer drugs on the market. The company that pharmaceutical giants like Cross Therapeutics wanted destroyed. She studied his biography. West Point graduate. Army Ranger 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Founded Kane Pharmaceutical in 2012 with a simple mission: make life-saving drugs affordable. 12 years later, he was on the verge of releasing a generic version of oncozine that would cost 90% less than the original. Cross Therapeutics stood to lose billions. She scanned the crowd more carefully now. There, near the bar, a man in a charcoal suit watching Kane with an expression that was too focused to be casual. Mid-50s, thinning hair, expensive watch. She checked her program again. Garrett Ashford, Vice President of Strategic Development, Cross Therapeutics. Callista's mouth went dry. She watched Ashford for another moment, watched him check his watch, then his phone, then glanced toward the kitchen entrance where the waitstaff were emerging with trays of champagne. He moved through the crowd with purpose. Intercepted one of the waiters, spoke to him briefly. The waiter nodded, adjusted his tray, and headed toward the stage, toward Kane. Callista's eyes tracked the waiter's path, watched him navigate through the clusters of conversation, watched him approach Kane's group with a professional smile. "Champagne, gentlemen." Kane was in the middle of a sentence. He paused, glanced at the tray, and reached for a glass without really looking at it. And that was when Callista smelled it. The scent hit her like a physical blow. Bitter almond, sharp chemical, unmistakable. And underneath it, something else, something synthetic. A masking agent designed to fool the average nose. But Callista's nose wasn't average. The doctors had explained it after the accident. In rare cases, the brain trying to compensate for the loss of one sense amplified another. Callista's brain had amplified her olfactory system to extraordinary levels. Hyperosmia, they called it, the ability to detect scents at concentrations as low as 1 part per billion. But right now, standing in a ballroom full of Colorado's pharmaceutical elite, it was telling her something impossible. The champagne in Thaddeus Kane's hand contained cyanide. For one frozen moment, Callista couldn't move. But no, the scent was coming from the glass. Potassium cyanide metabolites mixed with synthetic benzaldehyde to mask the characteristic bitter almond odor. And Kane was raising the glass to his lips. Callista moved. She crossed the ballroom in 7 seconds flat. Kane's group fell silent as she approached. Kane himself barely glanced at her. The glass was an inch from his mouth. Callista's hand shot out. She slapped the champagne glass hard. The crystal tumbler flew from Kane's grip, arced through the air, and shattered against the marble floor. Champagne splashed everywhere. The ballroom went silent. 200 conversations stopped mid-sentence. 200 faces turned to stare. Kane looked at her, pale blue eyes, cold and absolutely furious. What the hell? Then he stopped. Because the champagne on the floor was doing something champagne shouldn't do. It was hissing. Where the liquid had splashed against the marble, it bubbled and frothed. The stone beneath it began to discolor. Tiny wisps of vapor rose from the puddle. "Don't touch it!" Kane's voice cut like a whip. He grabbed one of his companions back. Then his eyes locked on Callista again. "What is that?" Callista pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She typed as fast as her trembling fingers would allow. Potassium cyanide. Concentration approximately 0.03%. Mixed with synthetic bitter almond masking compound. Enough to stop your heart in 90 seconds. She turned the phone to show him. Kane read it. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "How do you know that?" She typed again. "I smelled it." "You smelled it." She nodded. From where? She gestured to where she'd been standing, 40 feet away. One of the other men laughed. "That's impossible. Cyanide is odorless." Callista shook her head. Typed. Potassium cyanide metabolizes into hydrogen cyanide, which has a bitter almond scent. Most people can't smell it genetic variation. But I can. I have hyperosmia, enhanced olfactory sensitivity. Kane studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his own phone and dialed. This is Thaddeus Kane. I need a hazmat team at the Denver Convention Center immediately. Possible chemical contamination. He ended the call and looked at Callista again. Security is going to want to talk to you. She nodded. What's your name? She showed him the screen again. Callista Frost. Something flickered across his face. Frost. He said it quietly. Any relation to David and Elara Frost? Callista's heart stopped. She stared at him. Managed a nod. Kane's expression shifted. Your parents were good people, he said. I'm sorry for what happened to them. Around them, the ballroom had erupted into chaos. Security was cordoning off the area, but Kane didn't move. He just stood there, looking at her with those pale, intense eyes. You saved my life, he said quietly. Why? Callista typed. Because someone killed my parents 14 years ago. And I think whoever tried to kill you tonight is the same person. Kane read the message. His jaw tightened. We need to talk, he said. But not here. The Denver Police Department's hazmat team arrived in 14 minutes. They tested the champagne puddle. They tested the broken glass. They tested the remaining glasses on the waiter's tray. The waiter himself sat in a folding chair near the kitchen entrance, face pale, hands shaking. Both he and the bartender claimed they had no idea how cyanide got into the champagne. Both of them were lying. Callista could smell it on them, the acrid tang of adrenaline, the sour note of fear, and underneath that, something that smelled like cash. She sat in a conference room on the second floor with a detective. Young guy, maybe 30. Detective James Morrison. Let's go through it one more time, he said. Callista typed on her phone. I was standing near the refreshment table. When the waiter got within approximately 40 feet of my position, I detected the scent of bitter almonds and synthetic benzaldehyde. Both are associated with cyanide compounds. I moved to intercept before Mr. Kane could drink from the contaminated glass. Morrison frowned. And you're sure it was cyanide you smelled? She picked up a pen and notepad. She wrote, I have hyperosmia. Olfactory sensitivity approximately 1000 times normal. I can differentiate between natural almond scent and cyanide metabolites. The concentration, molecular structure, and volatility are different. The door opened. An older man stepped in 50s gray suit. Detective Lieutenant Marcus Reeves. Miss Frost? He nodded at her. Mind if I join you? She shook her head. Reeves sat down. Hazmat just confirmed. Potassium cyanide 0.03% concentration. Enough to kill an adult male in under 2 minutes. He looked at Callista. You saved his life. No question. She gave a small nod. Now I need to understand how you knew. She showed him the notepad where she'd explained her hyperosmia. Reeves read it carefully. You're a chemist. She wrote fragrance chemist. I work at Alpine Scent Solutions. I analyze and develop synthetic fragrance compounds. Miss Frost, Reeves said slowly. We're going to need you to stay available for follow-up questions. Don't leave town without notifying us first. She wrote, Am I a suspect? No. But you're the only witness who can testify to smelling the poison. That makes you valuable. He paused. And possibly a target. The words hung in the air. Reeves stood. Miss Frost, do you have a way to get home? She nodded. Go straight there. Lock your doors. If you see anything unusual, call 911 immediately. He handed her a business card. My direct line is on there. Callista took the card. Wrote, What about Mr. Kane? Mr. Kane is with his security team. He's safe. Reeves moved toward the door, then paused. He asked if he could speak with you before you leave. You don't have to if you don't want to. Callista hesitated. Every rational instinct told her to go home. But another part of her, the part that had spent 14 years wondering if her parents' deaths were really an accident, wanted answers. She wrote, Where is he? They'd given Kane a private office on the 3rd floor. 2 security guards stood outside the door. They nodded at Reeves and stepped aside to let Callista enter. Thaddeus Kane stood by the window looking down at the street below. He'd taken off his tuxedo jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars. He turned when she entered. "Miss Frost." His voice was quieter now. "Please sit." Callista sat in one of the chairs, pulled out her phone. Kane sat across from her. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. He looked like a man who'd lived several lifetimes and hadn't enjoyed most of them. "The police tell me you have hyperosmia," he said. She nodded. "Caused by the same accident that took your voice." Another nod. "Your parents were pharmaceutical researchers. They worked for Cross Therapeutics." She typed, "They were auditors. They discovered fraud in Cross's cancer drug trials. 2 days later, they were dead." Kane read the message. His hands tightened on the armrests of his chair. "You think Cross had them killed?" "I know they did. My father told me on the phone an hour before the crash. He said they had proof that Cross Therapeutics had falsified efficacy data for oncozine." "What proof?" "I don't know. It died with them." Kane was quiet for a long moment. "Oncozine," he said finally. "The drug my company is about to release a generic version of." "Yes." Kane stood, walked back to the window. "Cross Therapeutics has a monopoly on late-stage pancreatic cancer treatment. Oncozine costs $12,000 per dose. Patients need it every 2 weeks for 6 months. That's over $300,000 per treatment course." He turned back to face her. "My generic version costs $800 per dose. Same active ingredient, same efficacy, 93% cheaper. We've been through FDA approval. We launch in 6 weeks." She typed, "They stand to lose $4 billion annually. More than that. Once the generic is out, the insurance companies will stop covering the brand name. Cross will lose everything. So they tried to kill you." "Seems that way." She wrote, "You're not surprised." Kane gave a bitter smile. "I've been getting death threats for 3 years. Someone sabotaged one of our manufacturing facilities in Ohio last year." He sat back down. "Cross Therapeutics has billions of dollars and a CEO who built her company from nothing. You think she's going to let me destroy it without a fight?" "Have you gone to the police? With what evidence?" He shook his head. "Vivian Cross is too smart to leave fingerprints." The name hit Callista like a slap. She typed quickly. "Vivian Cross is CEO for the last 30 years. Why? She was CEO when my parents died. She would have been the one who ordered the falsified data." Kane leaned forward. "You're sure my father said her name on the phone? I have emails from Vivian Cross herself ordering the changes." "Jesus Christ." Kane ran a hand through his hair. "The same woman who's trying to kill me now killed your parents 14 years ago." They sat in silence. Callista's phone buzzed. "Dr. Palmer." "Where are you?" "I'm at the conference center, but they won't let me in." She typed a response, "I'm fine. Police are interviewing witnesses. I'll call you tomorrow." Then she looked back at Kane and typed, "What happens now?" Kane's smile was sharp. "Now I hire the best private security firm in Colorado, and I make sure my lawyers have everything they need to bury Cross Therapeutics in litigation." "That's defense. What about offense?" Kane studied her. "What are you suggesting?" Callista hesitated. "But her parents were dead, 14 years dead, and the woman who'd ordered their murder had just tried to kill again." She wrote, "You need proof that Cross ordered the hit. I can help you find it." "How?" "The same way I smell the poison. I can smell when people are lying. I can detect chemical residues that forensic teams miss. And I know how Cross operates because my parents documented their investigation before they died." "I thought you said the proof died with them." Callista took a breath. "I lied. I have their files. I've had them for 14 years. I just didn't know what to do with them until now." The file was in a storage unit in Aurora. Callista drove there at 11 p.m. Kane, following in his own car with 2 security guards. The facility was one of those depressing cinder block mazes lit by flickering fluorescent tubes. Unit 237, 3rd floor, far corner. The padlock was covered in dust. She fumbled with the key and finally got it open. The door rolled up with a metallic screech. Inside boxes, dozens of them. Her parents' entire life reduced to cardboard and packing tape. Callista walked between the boxes reading labels, her mother's handwriting precise and careful. Kitchen, dishes, David's office, books, Callie's room, toys. She found the one she wanted in the back corner. Work files, defrost. Kane stepped forward. "Let me." He lifted the box easily and carried it out to the hallway. Callista knelt beside it, pulled out her keys, and used one to slice through the packing tape. Inside files, notebooks, USB drives. She pulled out the first folder, opened it. Cross Therapeutics, Oncozine, Phase 3, Trial Confidential, FD. A submission pending. Kane knelt beside her. "May I?" She handed him the folder. He read in silence for 3 minutes. His face got harder with every page. "Son of a bitch," he said quietly. "Your father documented everything. Trial enrollment numbers, patient outcomes, statistical analysis." Kane flipped another page. The actual efficacy rate was 11.3%. Cross reported 87.1% to the FDA. He looked at Callista. "This is fraud on a massive scale. If the FDA had seen this data, Oncozine never would have been approved. Thousands of patients have been taking a drug that barely works." Callista felt sick. She reached into the box and pulled out another item. A USB drive in a plastic bag. Labeled in her father's handwriting, "Cross emails. Backup." Her hands started shaking again. Kane noticed. "You okay?" She nodded. Pulled out her phone. This is what they died for. Proof that Vivian Cross ordered the data falsification. My father made a backup before he went to the FDA. "Have you read it?" She shook her head. "I was 12. I didn't understand what any of it meant. After the accident, my aunt packed everything up. I forgot it was here until tonight." Kane took the USB drive carefully. "We need to look at this, but not here." "Where? My office. It's secure." She typed, "They took my voice. They took my parents. They almost took you. I'm done letting them win." Kane looked at her for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. "Partners." She took his hand. His grip was warm, steady. "Partners," he said. And for the first time in 14 years, Callista didn't feel alone. Kane's office was in a high-rise in downtown Denver. They took the elevator to the 23rd floor. Kane used his thumbprint to unlock the glass doors. The space was unexpectedly sparse. Just clean lines, functional furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Coffee?" Kane asked. Callista nodded. He moved to a small kitchen area. She heard the hiss of an espresso machine. Kane returned with 2 cups. "Black, right?" She looked at him surprised. He smiled slightly. "Lucky guess." Kane gestured to the conference table. "Let's see what we've got." He connected the USB drive to his laptop. The file directory appeared. Hundreds of documents, emails, spreadsheets, scanned memos. Kane opened the first email. From Vivian Cross to Richard Carmichael, Head of Clinical Research. Date March 15th, 2011. Subject Phase 3 results. Urgent, Richard. The preliminary data is unacceptable. 11% efficacy won't get us FDA approval. I don't care how you do it, but those numbers need to be at least 85% before submission. Use smaller sample sizes. Exclude non-responders. Reclassify partial responses as full responses. Whatever it takes. We have $200 million invested in this trial. Failure is not an option. V.C. Kane read it aloud. His voice was flat, but Callista could see the anger in the set of his jaw. He opened another email. From Richard Carmichael to Vivian Cross. Date March 18th, 2011. Vivian, I have restructured the data analysis as requested. By excluding 67% of enrolled patients and reclassifying progression-free survival parameters, we can report 87.1% efficacy. However, I need to stress that this is scientific fraud. If discovered, we're looking at criminal charges and complete loss of FDA approval. R.C. Kane opened a third email from Vivian Cross to Richard Carmichael. Date March 18, 2011. Richard, your concerns are noted. Do it anyway and delete these emails. VC, she ordered the fraud in writing, Kane said, and she ordered the evidence destroyed. He looked at Callista. Your father got these before Carmichael deleted them. Callista nodded. Typed, my father was the external auditor. He had access to the servers before Cross locked him out. Kane scrolled through more emails. His face got darker with each one. At the bottom of the folder, a video file. Kane clicked it. The video showed a conference room. Cross Therapeutics logo on the wall. Timestamp, April 3rd, 2011. Vivian Cross sat at the head of the table. Late 50s in the video, blonde hair, pulled back, expensive suit. She started talking. Gentlemen, the FDA submission is in 2 weeks. I want to be very clear about expectations. The data show 87% efficacy. Anyone who suggests otherwise will be terminated immediately. Anyone who speaks to outside auditors will be prosecuted for breach of confidentiality. And anyone who thinks they can go to the press or the FDA with concerns will discover that I have very expensive lawyers and very few scruples about using them. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. This drug is going to make us $8 billion a year. I didn't build this company from nothing to let some ethics committee destroy it now. Are we clear? Murmurs of assent around the table. The video ended. Kane sat back in his chair. That's a confession. Direct, explicit, recorded. Callista nodded. Typed, my parents were going to give this to the FDA. Cross found out. Killed them. How? I don't know. The crash was ruled accidental. No investigation. Kane was quiet for a moment. Then, we need to find out who else knew about this. He turned to his laptop and opened a new browser window. Started searching. Richard Carmichael, head of clinical research at Cross Therapeutics in 2011. He read from the screen. Died in 2014, heart attack. Callista's stomach dropped. Kane kept searching. Dr. Lisa Morton, principal investigator on the Unshaken trial. Died in 2013, car accident. He looked at Callista. His face was grim. Everyone who knew about the fraud is dead, except Vivian Cross. Callista's hands were shaking. She typed, she's been killing people for 14 years to cover this up, and tonight she tried to add me to the list. Kane closed the laptop. We can't go to the FDA with this, not yet. Cross has too many connections. She'll bury the evidence and us along with it. Then, what do? Kane stood, walked to the window. We build an airtight case. We find evidence she can't destroy, witnesses she can't kill. And then we take everything to the Senate Committee on Health and Pharmaceutical Oversight. He turned back to face her. Public hearings, televised testimony, make it so big she can't make it disappear. How long will that take? Weeks, maybe months. Callista shook her head. Typed, my mentor is dying. Barnaby Lowell, pancreatic cancer, stage 4. He's been on Unshaken for 6 months. It's not working. He has maybe 3 months left. She looked at Kane. How many other people are dying because they think Unshaken will save them? How many families are bankrupting themselves for a drug that doesn't work? Kane's jaw tightened. Too many. We don't have months. Then what do you suggest? Callista thought about it. Thought about Vivian Cross's video confession. Thought about the emails, ordering fraud. Thought about 14 years of silence while people died for profit. She typed, we force her hand. We make her think she's won. And then we make her confess on record the same way my father did. Kane studied her. That's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. True. He almost smiled. Okay. How do we do it? Callista pulled up a new note on her phone. Started typing out a plan. It was insane. It was reckless. It required her to put herself directly in Vivian Cross's crosshairs. But it was also the only way to end this. She showed Kane the plan. He read it twice. You're sure about this? She nodded. Because once we start, there's no going back. Cross will know you're coming for her. She'll come for you. She typed, I've been silent for 14 years. It's time to make some noise. Kane looked at her for a long moment. Then he held out his hand again. Then let's make it loud. Callista shook his hand, and somewhere in the darkness of Denver, Vivian Cross slept peacefully, not knowing that the daughter of the people she'd murdered was about to destroy everything she'd built. But she'd find out soon enough. The plan was simple in theory. Callista would get hired at Cross Therapeutics, get close to Vivian Cross, use her hyperosmia to gather evidence the old-fashioned way. In practice, the plan was terrifying. You understand what you're asking for, Kane said. It was 4 in the morning. You're asking to walk into the lion's den and hope she doesn't recognize you. Callista typed, She's never seen me. I was 12 when my parents died. Different name on my employment records. Different face. Frost isn't exactly a common name. I go by Callista Morgan professionally. My aunt's surname. It's on all my credentials. Kane nodded slowly. Even so, Cross Therapeutics does background checks. Thorough ones. They'll find the connection. Then we make sure they don't look that hard. We make me too valuable to waste time investigating. She pulled up a new note, started typing. Cross Therapeutics is developing a new fragrance compound for their oncology wards. They've posted a job listing for a senior fragrance chemist. I'm the best candidate in Colorado. Kane raised an eyebrow. Modest. Accurate. I have published 6 papers on synthetic fragrance compounds. I have patents. And I can do things with my nose that their entire R&D department combined can't do. They'll want references. Dr. Palmer will give me one. And I have 3 other professors who'll vouch for my technical skills. Kane was quiet for a moment. Then, when does the application close? Friday. 3 days from now. Kane stood, walked to the window. The sky was starting to lighten in the east. If you do this, he said quietly, you need to understand something. Vivian Cross has killed at least 4 people that we know of. Your parents, Richard Carmichael, Dr. Lisa Morton. She tried to kill me last night. She will not hesitate to kill you if she discovers who you are. I know. I can't protect you inside Cross Therapeutics. Once you're in that building, you're on your own. I know. Callista stood, walked over to stand beside him at the window. She typed, 14 years ago, my father gave me a USB drive and told me to hide it. I've been hiding ever since. Hiding from the truth. Hiding from the people who killed my parents. Hiding from my own voice. She looked up at him. I'm done hiding. Kane studied her face. Finally he nodded. Okay, but we do this smart. You wear a wire. Audio recording concealed in a necklace or a watch. Something that looks normal but captures everything. Cross will sweep for recording devices. Not if we use the right technology. I know a guy, former NSA. He specializes in covert surveillance equipment that can beat most standard sweeps. How much does that cost? Kane's smile was thin. I'm worth $300 million, Miss Frost. I think I can afford a wire. The next 3 days were a blur. Callista submitted her application to Cross Therapeutics at 9 a.m. on Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, she had a call from their HR department requesting an interview. By Thursday morning, she was sitting in a conference room on the 14th floor of the Cross Therapeutics building in downtown Denver, trying not to throw up. The HR representative was a woman in her 40s named Sharon Mitchell. Professional smile, firm handshake. Thank you for coming in on such short notice, Sharon said. We've been looking for the right candidate for this position for 3 months. Your credentials are impressive. Callista nodded, pulled out her tablet. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to learn more about the position. As you know from my application, I'm mute due to a medical condition, but I communicate via ASL and written text. Sharon read the message. Of course, that won't be a problem at all. In fact, one of the reasons we're particularly interested in your application is your hyperosmia. That's documented in your medical file, correct? Yes, I have enhanced olfactory sensitivity. Approximately 1000 times normal human baseline. It's the result of neurological compensation after a childhood accident. And you use this ability in your work as a fragrance chemist. Yes, I can identify individual compounds in complex mixtures. I can detect contamination at parts per billion concentrations. And I can develop fragrances that target specific psychological responses. Sharon nodded. That's exactly what we're looking for. Let me explain the position. She pulled out a folder. Cross Therapeutics is developing a new patient comfort initiative for our oncology treatment centers. We found that chemotherapy has a very distinctive smell. It's unpleasant. It makes patients anxious. We want to develop a fragrance system that masks those odors and creates a more calming environment. Callista typed, "What's the timeline?" "We want a prototype in 6 months, full deployment in 18 months. Budget is essentially unlimited. This is a priority project for our CEO." "Why is it a priority?" Sharon hesitated. "Between you and me, our flagship drug Oncozine is facing generic competition. We're looking for ways to differentiate our brand. Patient experience is part of that strategy." Callista kept her face neutral. Typed, "Makes sense. What would my role be specifically?" "You'd lead the fragrance development team. 3 other chemists reporting to you. Full access to our lab facilities. And you'd present regular updates to executive leadership, including Miss Cross herself." Callista's heart hammered against her ribs. "Perfect." She typed, "I'd be reporting directly to Miss Cross." "Not directly. Your immediate supervisor would be Dr. Garrett Ashford, VP of Strategic Development. But Miss Cross takes a personal interest in all major initiatives. You'd present to her at least monthly." Garrett Ashford, the man who'd been watching Kane at the gala. Callista made herself nod calmly. "When would you need me to start?" "Immediately. Monday if possible. I'll need to give 2 weeks notice at my current position." Sharon smiled. "We're prepared to compensate Alpine Scent Solutions for the inconvenience. And we're offering you $140,000 annually, plus benefits and a signing bonus of $20,000. That was almost double her current salary. She typed, "That's very generous." "Miss Cross believes in paying for top talent. So do we have a deal?" Callista pretended to think about it. She typed, "Yes, I accept." Sharon's smile widened. "Excellent. I'll have the contracts drawn up. You'll need to pass a background check and a drug screening, but those are just formalities. Welcome to Cross Therapeutics, Miss Morgan." Dolly shook hands. Callista walked out of the building 20 minutes later, her heart still racing. She made it 2 blocks before she had to stop and lean against the building. She'd done it. She was in. Her phone buzzed. A text from Kane. "How did it go?" She typed back, "I start Monday. They're running a background check. My guy can handle that. He'll make sure nothing problematic shows up. They offered me $140,000. Take it, thank you." "For what?" "For believing I can do this." There was a pause. "Then you saved my life with 90 seconds of warning and no ability to explain yourself verbally. If anyone can do this, it's you." Callista read the message 3 times. Then she pushed off the wall and started walking. She had 3 days to prepare for the most dangerous undercover operation of her life. Kane's guy turned out to be a nervous-looking man in his 60s named Daniel Harper. They met in a parking garage in Aurora. Harper arrived in a Toyota Camry that had seen better days. He looked like someone's accountant. He did not look like someone who'd spent 30 years designing covert surveillance systems for the National Security Agency. "Miss Frost," he said, shaking her hand. "Thaddeus speaks highly of you." Callista nodded. Harper opened his trunk. Inside was a metal briefcase. "I understand you need to beat a corporate security sweep. Cross Therapeutic uses Sentinel systems for their electronic countermeasures. Good equipment, not top tier but good. They sweep for RF transmission, magnetic anomalies, and thermal signatures." Who opened the briefcase? Inside what looked like a simple silver necklace with a small pendant. "This," Harper said, "is a quantum encrypted digital recorder. No RF transmission. It stores everything locally on a solid-state chip smaller than a grain of rice. No battery. It's powered by kinetic motion from your body. No heat signature above ambient temperature. And the casing is non-magnetic composite material." He handed it to Callista. It was lighter than it looked. How does it work? She typed on her phone. Wear it. It records everything within 15 feet. Voice activated, so it only saves when people are speaking. Storage capacity is approximately 200 hours. When you need to download the files, you put it in this case and connect to a computer via encrypted USB. What's the failure rate? In the field, less than 1%. I have had operatives wear these into foreign embassies, intelligence agencies, organized crime meetings. Never been detected. Callista put the necklace on. The pendant settled against her sternum. How much? Harper looked at Kane, who was standing a few feet away. Kane shook his head slightly. Already paid for, Harper said. Consider it a gift. Callista looked at Kane. Typed, I can't accept this. It's too expensive. Kane walked over. Yes, you can, because I need you to survive the next 6 months, and this gives you the best chance of doing that. His eyes were serious. Vivian Cross is careful. She doesn't make mistakes, but everyone slips eventually. When she does, I need you to have a recording of it. Understand? Callista nodded. Harper closed the briefcase. One more thing. Background check. He pulled out a tablet. Cross Therapeutics uses a standard check for employment verification. I've already inserted a clean background file for Callista Morgan into their system. Education verified. Employment history verified. No criminal record. No connection to David or a Lara Frost. He showed her the screen. It was her life. Rewritten. Sanitized. The insertion will hold up to standard scrutiny, Harper said. But if Cross orders a deep investigation, private detectives, financial forensics, that kind of thing, it'll fall apart. How long do I have before that happens? Depends on how suspicious you make her. Could be weeks, could be days. He looked at her seriously. Don't give her a reason to look closely. Callista nodded. Harper packed up his equipment, shook her hand again. Good luck, Miss Frost. Don't get killed. He drove away. Callista and Kane stood in the parking garage. You're really doing this, Kane said. Yes. Last chance to back out. I'm not backing out. Kane nodded slowly. Then there's one more thing you need to know. He pulled out his phone, showed her a news article from earlier that day. Pharmaceutical executive survives. Poisoning attempt. Denver. Thaddeus Kane, CEO of Kane. Pharmaceutical Industries was the target of an apparent assassination attempt at the Rocky Mountain Pharmaceutical Conference on Tuesday night. A champagne glass containing potassium cyanide was intercepted before Kane could drink it. Police are investigating. No arrests have been made. Callista read the article, looked at Kane. This will make Cross suspicious. She'll know the attempt failed. She'll be looking for whoever warned you. Exactly. Which is why the official story is that you're just a brilliant chemist with hyperosmia who happened to smell the poison and reacted instinctively. You had no idea who Kane was. No connection to the pharmaceutical industry beyond your job. Just a good Samaritan who saved a stranger's life. Will she believe that she'll want to, because the alternative that someone is actively investigating her means she's in danger? And people like Vivian Cross don't believe they're ever in danger. He looked at Callista. But you need to sell it. When you meet her on Monday, you're just Callista Morgan. Fragrance chemist. No family. No agenda. Just a woman who's very good at her job and wants to get paid. I can do that. I know you can. Kane hesitated. But if anything feels wrong, if you think she's suspicious, if you smell something off, you get out. Immediately. Don't wait. Don't try to gather more evidence. Just leave. How will you know if I'm in trouble? Kane pulled something from his pocket. A phone. Small, simple flip phone. Burner. Untraceable. You keep this with you at all times. If you need emergency extraction, you text one word red. I will have a team at Cross Therapeutics in under 10 minutes. Callista took the phone. What if I can't text? What if they take my phone? Then you find a way to trigger the fire alarm. Anything that gets you out of the building and into public view. He paused. But it won't come to that. You're smart. You're careful. You'll see danger before it sees you. You sound very sure. I'm sure, because you've already survived one attempt to kill you. You're harder to kill than Vivian Cross thinks. Callista touched the scar on her throat. She typed, "They took my voice, but they didn't take everything, and I'm going to make sure they regret that." Kane almost smiled. Good. Monday morning arrived. Callista sat at her kitchen table at 6 a.m. The necklace Harper had given her laid out on the formica surface beside an untouched cup of coffee. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pendant. She'd barely slept, spent the weekend reviewing every detail of her cover story. The woman who'd ordered her parents killed. The woman who'd built an empire on fraud and murder. The woman Callista was about to work for. She put on the necklace. The pendant settled against her chest, cool and solid. Recording. Always recording. She dressed carefully. Professional, but not flashy. Black slacks, white blouse. The kind of outfit that said competent scientist without saying threat. She checked her bag. Tablet, backup tablet, pens, notebook. The burner phone Kane had given her hidden in an inner pocket. Her regular phone buzzed. Kane, good luck today. Remember, you're just a chemist, nothing more. She typed back, understood. Kane and Callista. Be careful, it was the first time he'd used her first name. She typed, I will. Then she grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Cross Therapeutics was a 40-minute drive from her apartment. She arrived at 8:15. Parked in the visitor lot. Sat in her car for 5 minutes breathing. You can do this. You have to do this. She got out of the car. The building looked different in daylight, less imposing, just glass and steel and money. She walked through the front doors. The lobby security guard checked her ID, made a phone call. Miss Morgan, someone from HR will be down in a moment to escort you. Callista nodded, stood by the water feature, watched the water cascade over polished stone, counted her heartbeats. Miss Morgan, she turned. Sharon Mitchell from HR, same professional smile. Welcome to your first day. Let's get you set up. The next 2 hours were a blur of paperwork and orientation. Callista signed forms, received her permanent security badge, got her photo taken, was given a laptop, a lab coat and a key card for the research facilities. Sharon walked her through the building, showed her the cafeteria, the gym, the meditation room. We have excellent benefits, Sharon said. Full health, dental vision, 4 weeks vacation, matching 401k. Miss Cross believes in taking care of her employees. Callista nodded along. Tried to look impressed rather than disgusted. Finally, they reached the 14th floor, the research and development wing. Sharon used her key card to open the secure door. Your lab is down this hall. Dr. Ashford wanted to meet with you first thing, so I'll take you to his office. Callista's stomach tightened. Garrett Ashford, the man who'd been at the gala, the man who'd intercepted the waiter with the poisoned champagne. Sharon led her to a corner office, knocked. Come in. They entered. Garrett Ashford stood by the window. Mid-50s, expensive suit, thinning hair. He turned when they entered. He looked ordinary, forgettable, but when he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. Miss Morgan, welcome to Cross Therapeutics. He extended his hand. Callista shook it. His palm was dry, slightly cool, and underneath his cologne, something expensive bergamot and cedar, she caught something else. Chemical residue. The same compound she'd smelled on the waiter's tray at the gala. Potassium cyanide metabolites. Her blood turned to ice. Ashford had handled the poison personally. He smiled at her. Sharon tells me you have quite the impressive credentials. 6 publications, 3 patents, and hyperosmia. That's fascinating. I have never met anyone with that condition before. Callista pulled out her tablet, typed, Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Excellent. Let me show you to your lab. He dismissed Sharon with a nod, led Callista down the hall. As they walked, he talked about the fragrance project, about the timeline, about expectations. But Callista barely heard him, because every step, every breath, she could smell it. Cyanide residue on his hands, blood on his conscience, and the absolute certainty that if he discovered who she really was, she'd be the next person to die in an accident. They reached the lab. Ashford opened the door. "Your kingdom, Miss Morgan. Make yourself comfortable. I'll check in tomorrow to see how you're settling in." He left. Callista stood in the empty lab, heart hammering. She touched the pendant around her neck, felt it warm against her skin. Recording. She'd made it inside. Now came the hard part. Now she had to survive long enough to bring them all down. The lab was state-of-the-art. Gas chromatography equipment, mass spectrometers, fume hoods, everything a fragrance chemist could want. Callista spent the first day familiarizing herself with the equipment. Meeting her team, 3 other chemists, all younger than her, all clearly skeptical that their new boss was a mute woman they'd never heard of. She didn't care. She wasn't here to make friends. By 5 p.m., she'd established a basic workflow, reviewed the project parameters, started sketching out initial fragrance profiles, and listened. The lab was on the 14th floor, but the executive offices were on 15. Sound carried through the ventilation system. Callista positioned herself at a workstation directly below where she'd calculated Ashford's office to be. Put on headphones, ostensibly to listen to music while she worked. Actually to amplify the sounds from above. She heard meetings, phone calls, fragments of conversation. Nothing useful, not yet. But she was patient. At 6 p.m. most of the team left. Callista stayed, made it look like she was dedicated, hardworking. Really she was waiting for the building to empty. At 7:30 she heard it, footsteps above, a door opening, then voices. "Can't believe she's still alive. Garrett Ashford. The dosage should have been lethal." Another voice, older, female. Callista's breath stopped. Clearly someone warned him. The question is who? Vivian Cross. Callista's hands shook. She forced herself to stay still, to keep working, to look normal if anyone glanced into the lab. But her ears strained, the pendant around her neck capturing every word. "The police interviewed everyone at the gala," Ashford said. "Nobody saw anything suspicious, except that woman who knocked the glass away. The mute chemist. Right, Callista Morgan. They're calling her a hero. Good Samaritan who smelled the poison." Silence. Then Cross. "Do we believe that Panay the police do? She's nobody. Lab technician. No connection to Kane. No connection to anyone. Hyperosmia. That's what her medical records say. And you verified those records. Standard check did the background. Clean. No red flags." Another pause. "I don't like coincidences, Garrett. A woman with a superhuman sense of smell just happens to be standing near Kane at the exact moment we try to eliminate him. That's not luck. That's planning. You think Kane planted her? I think we need to be careful. Very careful." Callista's heart hammered so hard she thought they'd hear it through the floor. "What do you want me to do?" Ashford asked. "Watch her. If she makes contact with Kane, if she shows any sign of being more than what she appears to be, we deal with her." "How?" "The same way we've dealt with every other problem. Quietly. Permanently." Footsteps. A door closing. Silence. Callista sat frozen at her workstation. They suspected. Not enough to kill her yet. Not enough to investigate deeply. But enough to watch. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking. She touched the pendant, still recording. She had their voices, discussing murder, admitting to past eliminations. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. She needed more. Needed specifics. Needed Cross to say the words that would destroy her. Needed to stay alive long enough to get them. Callista packed up her equipment, left the lab, walked to her car on legs that felt like water. Got in, locked the doors, sat in the darkness of the parking garage and tried not to scream. Her phone buzzed, the burner. Kane status. She typed with shaking fingers. "They're suspicious. Cross told Ashford to watch me. If I make contact with you, they'll kill me. Then don't make contact. We communicate through this phone only, never in person, never on regular channels. I got them on recording. Talking about eliminating problems permanently. That's good. That's progress. They're going to kill me if they find out who I am. The response took a moment. Then, don't let them find out. You're smarter than they are, Callista. You've already survived them once. She stared at the message. Typed, I was 12. I had no choice. And now you're 26 and you still have no choice because if you run, if you quit, Cross wins. She keeps killing. She keeps profiting and your parents died for nothing. Callista closed her eyes. He was right. She hated it that he was right, but he was. She typed, okay, I'll stay, but I need more evidence, something undeniable. Then get it, I'll be here when you need me. Callista put the phone away, started her car, drove home through streets that suddenly felt full of ice. She made it home, locked every door, every window, sat on her couch in the darkness, and for the first time in 14 years, Callista Frost allowed herself to cry. Not because she was scared, though she was. Not because she was alone, though she was that too, but because she'd heard Vivian Cross's voice, the woman who'd ordered her parents' deaths, and she'd sounded so normal, so ordinary, so human. Like murder was just another business decision. Like 14 years of Callista's grief meant nothing. Like the thousands of cancer patients dying on a drug that didn't work were just acceptable losses in the pursuit of profit. Callista cried until she had no tears left. Then she stood up, walked to her bedroom, pulled the USB drive from its hiding place, looked at her father's handwriting on the label. Cross emails. Backup. I'm going to finish this, she whispered to the empty room. Her voice was barely a rasp, broken, damaged, but it was hers, and tomorrow she'd go back to Cross Therapeutics. Tomorrow she'd smile at Garrett Ashford. Tomorrow she'd walk past Vivian Cross in the hallway and pretend she didn't know the woman had killed her parents. Tomorrow she'd lie with every breath, because that was what it took to bring down an empire. And Callista Frost had been preparing for this her entire life, even if she hadn't known it until now. 3 weeks later, the pendant around Callista's neck had become a second heartbeat. She barely noticed its weight anymore, but every conversation it captured, every careless word spoken in the executive offices above her lab, brought her closer to the evidence she needed. Evidence that would hold up in a Senate hearing. Evidence that Vivian Cross couldn't bury. She'd learned to navigate the rhythms of Cross Therapeutics. Learned when Ashford took his coffee breaks. Learned when Cross held her Friday afternoon strategy sessions. Learned when the building emptied enough that she could move through it like a ghost. She'd gathered fragments, pieces of a puzzle. Ashford on the phone. The Ohio facility fire was clean. No investigation. Insurance paid out. Cross in a meeting. I want quarterly updates on Kane Pharmaceutical's production capacity. If they have any vulnerabilities, I want to know about them. A visiting consultant Callista never saw his face, only smelled gun oil and cordite on his clothes meeting with Cross. The Lowell situation. You want it handled the same way as Carmichael. Callista's blood had frozen when she heard that. Barnaby. They were going to kill Barnaby. She'd texted Kane immediately on the burner. He'd contacted Barnaby, warned him offered protection, but they were too late. 4 days later, Barnaby Lowell was found dead in his home. Natural causes, the death certificate said. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. Expected. Except Callista had visited the crime scene. Kane had pulled strings to get her access, listed as a family friend. She'd walked through Barnaby's bedroom, smelled the air, detected what the police had missed, potassium chloride residue on the bed sheets. Faint but unmistakable. Potassium chloride, used to stop the heart. Undetectable in an autopsy if the person already had a terminal illness. Murder disguised as mercy. Callista had stood at Barnaby's funeral 3 days ago, unable to speak the eulogy she'd written. She'd handed it to Kane instead. He'd read it for her. Barnaby Lowell believed in evidence. He believed in truth. He believed that silence in the face of injustice was complicity. He taught me that my voice wasn't in my throat, it was in my actions. Today, I act in his memory. After the service, she'd found a voicemail on her regular phone. Left the night before Barnaby died. His voice weak but determined. Callista, I know what you're doing. I've known for weeks. I'm not as senile as I let Cross think I am. Whatever evidence you're gathering, it's working. She's scared. I can smell it on her. Finish this. Don't let them win. And don't mourn me. I'm old. I'm dying anyway. But you have a whole life ahead of you. Make it count. Callista had listened to that message 14 times. Now sitting in her lab on a Friday evening, she listened to the voices filtering through the ventilation system above. Cross and Ashford. Their weekly strategy session. Kane's generic launches in 3 weeks. Ashford was saying, once it hits the market, our oncozine sales will drop by 70% within 6 months. Then we accelerate the timeline, Cross said. Her voice was cold, calculated. I want another attempt on Kane. This time make it look like natural causes. Heart attack, stroke, something the press won't question. The chemist Morgan, she'll smell any poison we use. Then don't do it where she can smell it. Do it at his home or in his car. Use something that dissipates quickly. And Garrett, yes. Make sure there are no witnesses this time. Callista's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold her pen. The pendant was recording. Every word, clear, undeniable. But it still wasn't enough. She needed Cross to say the words, to admit to the Frost murders, to Carmichael, to Morton, to Barnaby. She needed a full confession, and she had an idea how to get it. A terrible, dangerous idea. But Kane had said he'd be there when she needed him, and she needed him now. She waited it until 8 p.m. until the building was empty, then pulled out the burner phone. Typed, I need to force Cross's hand. Are you ready? The response came immediately. What do you need Senate hearing? Public. Within 2 weeks. Can you make it happen? I can try. What's your plan? Callista took a deep breath, typed out the full strategy. Kane's response took longer this time. That's incredibly dangerous. If she realizes what you're doing, she won't. Not until it's too late. You're sure no, but it's the only way. Another pause. Okay, I'll set it up. Senate Committee on Health and Pharmaceutical Oversight. I'll have my lawyers petition for an emergency hearing on oncozine efficacy concerns. You'll testify as an expert witness on pharmaceutical fragrance chemistry. That's your cover. When? 2 weeks from tomorrow, December 2nd, Washington, D.C. That gives me 14 days to get Cross on record. Callista, be careful, please. She stared at the screen. Typed, I will. Thank you, Kane. Thaddeus. Call me Thaddeus. She smiled despite everything. Thank you, Thaddeus. She put the phone away, looked around the lab. This place had become familiar, almost comfortable. In 2 weeks, she'd either destroy it or die trying. 10 days later, Callista had been planting seeds, carefully, subtly. She'd left her tablet unlocked on her desk. Let Ashford accidentally see notes about fragrance compound analysis. Notes that happened to mention sensitivity to metallic compounds and alkaloid residues. She'd asked pointed questions in team meetings. Do we need to account for drug interactions with the fragrance system? Some chemotherapy agents have volatile compounds that might create adverse reactions. She'd made herself visible, present, a problem that needed solving. And yesterday, the trap had sprung. Ashford had called her into his office. Miss Morgan, I'm concerned about something. Callista had tilted her head, pulled out her tablet. What's wrong, your hyperosmia? It's remarkable, valuable, but I'm wondering if it's become a liability for us. How so? Ashford had leaned back in his chair. You can smell things other people can't. That makes you an asset in fragrance development. But it also means you might smell things that are confidential, proprietary, things that could be misinterpreted. Callista had kept her face neutral. Typed, I signed an NDA. Everything I encounter here is confidential. Of course. But I'm talking about things you might smell accidentally. In the building, in meetings. Things that have nothing to do with your work. He'd looked at her very carefully. If you ever detected something unusual, something that concerned you, you'd report it to me first, correct, before going to anyone else. Callista had nodded. Typed, absolutely, you're my supervisor, chain of command. Ashford had smiled. Good. That's very good, Miss Morgan. I'm glad we understand each other. Is there something specific you're concerned about? No. Just wanted to make sure we were aligned. He stood signaling the end of the meeting. Keep up the excellent work. Miss Cross has been very impressed with your progress. Callista had left his office with her heart pounding. They were going to move against her, soon. The burner phone had buzzed that night. Kane's Senate hearing confirmed. December 2nd, 10 a.m. Committee hearing room. You'll be called as an expert witness. My legal team will handle the technical presentation, but you'll need to be ready to testify. Callista understood. Kane and Callista, I'm having a security team shadow you. They'll stay out of sight, but if you trigger the extraction signal, they'll be there in under 5 minutes. Callista, I thought you said 10 minutes. Kane, that was before they killed Barnaby. Now I'm not taking chances. Callista, thank you. Kane, 5 more days, then you're out of there. Can you hold on for 5 more days, Callista? I have to. December 1st, one day before the hearing. Callista's car wouldn't start. She'd come out to the Cross Therapeutics parking garage at 6 p.m. after another day of recording damning conversations to find her Honda completely dead. She tried the ignition 3 times. Nothing. Not even a click. Then she'd smelled it. Brake fluid. Fresh. Coming from under the car. She'd gotten out. Knelt down. Looked under the chassis. The brake line had been cut. Cleanly. Professionally. If she'd driven home on the highway, she would have lost braking capability at 60 miles per hour. The crash would have looked like driver error. Mechanical failure. Another accident. Just like her parents. Callista had stood up, looked around the parking garage, empty, or appeared to be. She'd pulled out the burner phone, texted Kane. Read within 3 minutes, 2 SUVs had screamed into the parking garage. Kane's security team. They'd surrounded her car, swept the area, found the cut brake line. The team leader, a woman named Sarah, with a scar across her jaw, had looked at Callista with something like respect. You called it in before you even tried to drive. Smart. Callista had typed on her phone. I smelled the brake fluid. Sarah had radioed Kane. She's safe. Extraction complete. What are your orders? Kane's voice had come through the radio. Get her to the airport, private jet to DC. She's testifying tomorrow. I'm not giving Cross another chance. Callista had looked back at the Cross Therapeutics building. 14th floor. Her lab. She'd wanted to go back, get her research, download the pendant's recordings. But Sarah had shaken her head. We have remote access to the pendant. Everything you recorded is already backed up to Kane's secure servers. You don't need to go back in there. Ever, one of the other guards had added. Callista had nodded, let them escort her to the SUV, watched the Cross Therapeutics building disappear in the rear-view mirror. She'd spent 14 years wondering if she'd imagined her father's warning. Don't trust anyone. She hadn't imagined it. And tomorrow, in front of the United States Senate, she was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what Vivian Cross had done. December 2nd, Washington, D.C. The Senate hearing room was smaller than Callista had expected, but it was packed. Journalists, pharmaceutical executives, FDA officials, patient advocacy groups, and at the witness table, flanked by 3 lawyers in expensive suits, Vivian Cross and Garrett Ashford. Callista sat in the back row, wearing a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, the pendant around her neck, containing 200 hours of recorded conversations. Kane sat beside her. He'd flown in on the same private jet, spent the entire flight, briefing her on hearing protocol, making sure she understood the questions his lawyers would ask. You don't have to speak, he'd reminded her. Everything you say can be typed and read aloud by the interpreter. The Americans with Disabilities Act guarantees your right to testify. Now watching Cross smooth her blonde hair and smile at the senators, Callista felt a strange calm settle over her. No more hiding, no more fear. Just the truth. Senator Patricia Reeves, chairman of the Committee on Health and Pharmaceutical Oversight, called the hearing to order. This emergency session has been convened to examine concerns regarding the efficacy and safety of oncozine manufactured by Cross Therapeutics. We'll begin with testimony from the petitioner Kane Pharmaceutical Industries. Kane's lead attorney, a sharp woman named Angela Torres, approached the microphone. Madam Chair, members of the committee, we are here today because thousands of Americans are dying while taking a medication they believe will save their lives. A medication that costs $300,000 per treatment course. A medication that, according to evidence we will present today, has an actual efficacy rate of 11.3%, not the 87.1% reported to the FDA. Murmurs rippled through the room. Cross's lead attorney stood. Objection. These are baseless allegations. Oncozine has been on the market for 13 years. It saved countless lives. Senator Reeves banged her gavel. You'll have your chance to respond. Continue, Miss Torres. Torres nodded. We have documentation showing systematic fraud in the Phase 3 clinical trial. We have emails from Cross Therapeutics executives ordering data manipulation. We have video evidence of the CEO threatening researchers who questioned the results. And we have testimony from an expert witness who has gathered further evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy. She gestured to Callista. The committee calls Miss Callista Frost to testify. Callista stood, walked to the witness table. Every eye in the room followed her. Cross's face showed nothing, but Callista caught the scent from 20 feet away. Fierce sweat, sharp, acrid. Cross recognized the name Frost. Callista sat, placed her tablet on the table. An ASL interpreter took position beside her. Senator Reeves spoke. Miss Frost, please state your name and occupation for the record. Callista typed. The interpreter read aloud. My name is Callista Frost. I am a fragrance chemist and former employee of Cross Therapeutics. Cross leaned forward, whispered urgently to her lawyer. Senator Reeves continued. Miss Frost, I understand you have a medical condition that prevents you from speaking. Is that correct? Callista typed. Yes, Senator. My vocal cords were destroyed in a car accident when I was 12 years old. The same accident that killed my parents, David and Elara Frost. The room went silent. Cross was staring at her now, really looking, seeing past the professional clothes and the 14 years of aging, seeing the 12-year-old girl who should have died in that car. Callista typed again. The interpreter read, my parents were pharmaceutical auditors hired to examine Cross Therapeutics' oncozine Phase 3 trial data. In 2010, they discovered massive fraud. Vivian Cross ordered their deaths to prevent them from reporting to the FDA. Objection! Cross's lawyer was on his feet. This is slander we demand. Overruled. Senator Reeves's voice was ice. The witness will continue. Callista pulled the USB drive from her bag, handed it to Torres. This drive contains emails from Vivian Cross ordering the data falsification. It contains a video of Miss Cross threatening her staff. It contains the original trial data showing the true efficacy rate. My father saved this evidence before he was killed. I have kept it for 14 years. Torres connected the drive to the hearing room's display system. The first email appeared on the screen behind Callista. From Vivian Cross, subject Phase 3 results. Urgent. I don't care how you do it, but those numbers need to be at least 85% before submission. Then the second. Do it anyway and delete these emails. Then the video. Vivian Cross, 13 years younger but unmistakable, threatening her research team. I didn't build this company from nothing to let some ethics committee destroy it now. The room exploded. Journalists shouting questions. Senators demanding order. Cross's lawyers huddling. And Cross herself sitting absolutely still, face pale, watching her empire crumble in real time. Senator Reeves banged the gavel repeatedly. Order, order in this chamber. When the room quieted, she looked at Cross. Miss Cross, do you have a response to this evidence? Cross stood slowly. Her hands were shaking. Senator, these emails are out of context. The pharmaceutical development process is complex. Decisions were made based on the best available science at the time. Callista typed. The interpreter read, "That's a lie, and I can prove it." She reached up, unclasped the pendant around her neck, handed it to Torres. "For the past 6 weeks, I've been working undercover at Cross Therapeutics. This pendant is a recording device. It contains audio of Miss Cross and her VP Garrett Ashford discussing murder, specifically the murders of Richard Carmichael, Dr. Lisa Morton, and my mentor, Barnaby Lowell. It also contains conversations, planning another assassination attempt on Thaddeus Kane." Torres connected the pendant to the audio system. Vivian Cross's voice filled the hearing room. "Watch her. If she makes contact with Kane, if she shows any sign of being more than what she appears to be, we deal with her." How? The same way we've dealt with every other problem. Quietly. Permanently. Cross's face went from pale to grey. Ashford was already standing. "I want immunity. I'll testify against her. I'll tell you everything. She ordered all of it. The Frost murders, Carmichael Morton, Lowell, the attempts on Kane. I have documentation. I have." "Shut up!" Cross screamed. "Shut your mouth, you idiot." But Ashford kept talking, couldn't stop talking. The car crash in 2010, she hired a driver to run the Frosts off the road, made it look like an accident. I have the payment records. Carmichael's heart attack, potassium injection, Morton's car accident, cut brake lines just like we did to Morgan yesterday. Lowell, same thing, potassium chloride, untraceable. Cross lunged across the table, tried to reach Ashford. Her lawyers grabbed her. "I built this company," Cross was screaming now. All composure gone. "I saved lives. Kane was going to destroy everything. Those auditors were going to ruin us. I did what I had to do." Senator Reeves was banging the gavel. "Marshal, take them into custody." Federal marshals moved in. Cross fought. Actually fought. It took 3 marshals to restrain her. As they dragged her past Callista Cross, locked eyes with her. "You should have died with your parents," she hissed. Callista stood, looked Cross directly in the face, and smiled. Then she typed one final message. The interpreter read it aloud. "But I didn't, and now everyone knows what you are." The marshals pulled Cross away. The hearing room erupted again. Callista sat down. Her hands were shaking, her heart was racing. But it was over. Kane's hand covered hers, squeezed once. She looked at him. He was smiling. "You did it," he said quietly. "You actually did it." She typed on her tablet, showed him. "We did it." He squeezed her hand again. And for the first time in 14 years, Callista felt something she'd almost forgotten. Peace. 6 months later. The verdicts came down in late May. Vivian Cross, guilty on all counts. 2 counts, first-degree murder. David and Delara Frost. 3 counts, felony murder. Carmichael Morton Lowell. Conspiracy to commit murder. Kane attempts. Pharmaceutical fraud. Racketeering. Sentence life in prison, without possibility of parole. Garrett Ashford, guilty as an accessory. 40 years eligible for parole after 25. Cross Therapeutics bankrupt. Assets liquidated. A victims' compensation fund was established with the proceeds. Every patient who taken Oncozine received a settlement. The FDA pulled Oncozine from the market. Kane's generic, properly tested, properly priced took its place. Cancer treatment costs dropped by 70% virtually overnight. And Callista Frost found herself sitting in a corner office in a federal building in Washington, D.C., looking out over the city. The door opened. Thaddeus Kane walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said. She smiled, took the cup. He sat across from her desk. "How does it feel first day as Director of Pharmaceutical Ethics Oversight?" She pulled out her tablet, typed, "Surreal. 6 months ago, I was a lab technician who couldn't get credit for her own research. Now I'm in charge of a federal agency. You earned it. The Frost-Kane Pharmaceutical Integrity Act wouldn't exist without you. Hell, half the reform legislation that passed this session came directly from your testimony. Our testimony. You're the one who risked your company pushing for generics. My company's doing fine. Better than fine, actually. Turns out people like buying life-saving medications that doesn't bankrupt them. He sipped his coffee. So, first case as director. What are you working on? She turned her laptop to show him. Insulin manufacturer, price-fixing conspiracy. I can smell it. Kane looked at the documents, looked at her, smiled. Then I guess they're in trouble. Callista smiled back. Typed. They have no idea. Callista visited her parents' grave on a Sunday in June. The cemetery in Colorado was quiet, peaceful. Aspen trees rustling in the breeze. She knelt by the headstone, placed fresh flowers, pulled the USB drive from her pocket, the one her father had given her with his dying breath. She placed it next to the flowers. I finished it, she whispered. Her voice was still just a rasp, broken, damaged, but it was hers. You told me to hide it. I did. For 14 years, I hid. But then I stopped hiding. I stopped being silent, and I made them pay for what they did to you. The wind rustled the aspen leaves. Cross is in prison. Ashford's in prison. Their company is gone, and the drug you died trying to expose, it's off the market. Forever. She touched the headstone, her father's name, her mother's name. I wish you could have seen it. Wish you could have been there when she was dragged out of that hearing room, screaming. Wish you could know that you were right, that the evidence you saved changed everything. She stood. I have your job now, sort of. Director of Pharmaceutical Ethics Oversight. I investigate companies. I find fraud. I stop them before they hurt people. She smiled. I use my nose, just like you taught me. She turned to leave, then paused, looked back at the grave one more time. Oh, and Dad, I met someone. His name is Thaddeus. You'd like him. He's stubborn, principled, doesn't give up. She touched her throat, the scar that had stolen her voice. He says my silence makes me a better investigator. Says people underestimate me. Tell me things they shouldn't because they think I can't repeat it. She laughed quietly. He's not wrong. She started walking toward her car, but she stopped one more time, pulled out her phone, typed a message. To Thaddeus Kane, I'm at my parents' grave, telling them about the work, about everything we've accomplished. Thought they should know. The response came quickly. Kane, they'd be proud of you. I'm proud of you. Callista, thank you for everything, for believing in me when no one else did. Kane, you made it easy. You're the strongest person I know, Callista Frost. She read the message twice, then typed, dinner tonight. I want to discuss the insulin case, and maybe some things that aren't about work. Kane, I'd like that. Pick you up at 7, Callista. It's a date. She put the phone away. Looked back at her parents' grave one last time. I'm okay now, she said softly. I'm not alone anymore, and I'm doing exactly what you'd want me to do. Making sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else. The wind carried the scent of aspens and wildflowers, and somewhere in the distance a bird sang. Callista walked to her car, got in, drove away from the cemetery and toward the city, toward her new life, toward a future where her silence wasn't a weakness. It was a weapon, and she was just getting started. They say silence is golden, but for Callista Frost, silence became something more. It became justice, it became truth, and it became the loudest voice in a room full of liars. For 14 years, she'd been told she was broken, damaged, less than. But she'd learned something her enemies never understood. You don't need a voice to speak truth to power. You just need the courage to stand up, the intelligence to gather evidence, and the patience to wait for the right moment to strike. Vivian Cross had built an empire on lies and murder. Callista Frost had torn it down with silence and science. And in the end, that made all the difference.